Welcome to Winter Storytelling. We begin today's program by acknowledging that we are gathered today on the homeland of the Selis people at a place they named Timsumclee. Their example as the original stewards of this land guides our work today. Travelers Rest Connection is committed to respectfully sharing the history and contemporary culture of the indigenous people who lived and traveled through the ancient crossroads on this land. We learn from many indigenous artists, elders, and organizations. We invite you to learn from and support them as well. I want to say a quick thank you to the members of Travelers Rest Connection and everyone who has made a donation to support Winter Storytelling 2024. A special thank you to our partners for today's program, Big Sky Documentary Film Festival, and MCAT, Missoula's community resource, who provided a grant to record the session today. If you are joining us via Zoom, it is helpful if you keep yourself muted and your video off during the presentation. We are working really hard today to make sure that the sound works for the people in the room and on Zoom, so please be patient with us. If you have questions for our speakers, please type them into the chat box on Zoom, and we'll monitor the chat for questions and for any technical difficulties you might have. I also wanted to note for the folks on Zoom, we are giving away 2 tickets to the world premiere of the whole documentary, the feature-length Bring Them Home, today at 6 p.m. at the Loma Theater. If you are interested, we have handed out raffle tickets in the room. If you did not get one and you want one, do this, and Jess is going to come find you. Okay? If you are interested and you are on Zoom, please type your phone number in the chat. And if you win, we will call you and make arrangements to meet you at the Wilma tonight and hand you your tickets. Okay. All right, Jess is walking around and handing out a few more raffle tickets. And while she's doing that, I'm going to introduce today's panel. We are so excited to have the filmmakers behind Bring Them Home, which, as I mentioned, has its world premiere tonight in Missoula. Very excited. Ivy MacDonald is a Montana-based director, filmmaker, producer, and cinematographer. She is an enrolled member of the Blackfeet tribe of Browning, Montana. She graduated from the University of Montana in 2017 with a BFA in digital filmmaking. Over the last 6 years, she has produced, shot, and directed work for Showtime, ESPN, and HBO. She was also a 4th World Media Lab Fellow for the Indigenous Filmmakers Program and an alumni of the Firelight Media Doc Lab Fellowship. Ivan MacDonald is an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker who is an enrolled member of the Blackfeet tribe. He was an inaugural member of the Illuminative and Netflix Producers Fellowship and is an alumni of the Firelight Media Documentary Lab with his sister Ivy. The MacDonald siblings' most recent project, Murder in Bighorn, premiered at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival and aired nationally on Showtime. The MacDonalds also created When They Were Here, a documentary that sheds light on the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls crisis. Daniel Glick is a director, writer, producer, cinematographer, and editor. For his short film, Iniskin, did I pronounce that right? Iniskin, he was nominated for 3 Emmy Awards, directing, producing, and photography, and won one for photography. I'm surprised you don't have it, because I just carried it with you, I probably would. Daniel's first feature documentary film, A Place to Stand, the true story of poet Jimmy Santiago Baca, broadcast nationally on PBS in 2018. He has directed and produced 6 fiction shorts and more than 20 short and branded documentaries, which collectively have won close to a dozen festival awards. We are so thrilled to have you. We are going to start today. We have some clips from the film, some questions for the panel, and then, as always, we will open it up to questions from you. But I thought we would start with the trailer for the film. Let's hope all tech works.
This has been our home for millennia. For almost that entire time, we've lived with and alongside buffalo, who we call Inni. But almost a century ago, both of us were the targets of genocide, and me were killed off from more than 30 million down to less than 1,000. In the span of one generation, they disappeared from our lives. Without them, our world collapsed. But there were some of us who refused to give up, who held tight to the hope that with the return of Amy would come the healing from this trauma for the people. This is a story of survival, of resilience, hope, adventure, and determination. This is our story, the story of the Nitsidaki, the Blackfoot people, who against enormous odds gave their lives and hearts to return Amy, to bring them home.
That's just beautiful, and every part of it is beautiful. I think the visuals, the sound, the music, you can sense, even just from the trailer, that this is a collaboration among lots of artists. But I wanted to start by asking you three, as artists, how did you come together? How did this project get started? And tell us just a little bit about it.
So, yeah, can you hear me okay? Is this off?
It's off.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so I'm not from the Blackfeet community. From Brooklyn, New York, originally. Live outside of Bozeman now. But ever since I moved to Montana about 10 years ago, I was wanting to do some kind of film about bison. I just started, I had dreams about them, and I just wanted to be around the animal. I loved animals ever since I was, I wanted to be a zookeeper when I was in kindergarten, so I was always in love with animals. And I tried to do a film about bison on Ted Turner's ranch, which is down the road from where I live, but they were like, no, go away. And then I was hired to do a film on the Blackfeet reservation about the Badger 2 medicine and protecting it from oil and gas leases, which were shady, they were leased 35 years ago in a way that wasn't so clean. And so the Blackfeet were fighting to protect that land. And while I was working on that project, I saw the Blackfeet herd of buffalo along Highway 2 in the summer. They bring them up to, right along the highway there. And I thought, okay, maybe here's my chance. And so I reached out to the head of the Buffalo program, Irvin Carlson, and he opened the door to film a couple of short films on a buffalo drive that they do twice a year. They have to move the animals across the reservation 30 miles. And in the process of making that, it was just a 3-day shoot, that one. But in the process of making that, I learned that the Blackfeet had this intention to set buffalo free, rewild them, let them loose somewhere on the reservation. They weren't sure where yet, but it was this intention to return the species fully. And that just, the way it was described to me sounded like an incredible story. And nobody else was telling it. I asked around, looked around, and so got permission to start filming, and it was just a few of us at the start, but I was always looking for Blackfeet collaborators, co-directors. And it took it was 3 years of just 4 of us filming up there. And then through our director of photography, an indigenous filmmaker named Zane Clampett, he was working with Ivan and Ivy here on another project, and he told me about them, and I said, oh, do you think they might be a good fit for the film? Because we want Blackfeet leaders in the project. And so I reached out to them, and that's how the collaboration began. That was in 2020. So someone can continue the story if you...
Yeah, kind of similar what to Daniel said. We had the opportunity. It was actually funny. Of course, Zane was one of our connections, but then our cousin Alia was in one of the narrative shorts that Daniel directed. So there was all of these really cool connections, and Ivy and I had just signed on to do our Showtime series, and that was more kind of developing and producing as opposed to directing. And Daniel and the team before had this really incredible vision. And we were just honored to kind of come in and support and kind of help in the process of getting it to the finish line. And it was a really great collaboration.
Is the lav mic okay? Did we mess it up? Okay. Do you have anything to add? Yep. Okay. Pass.
I was warned about this. Okay, so we're going to show, as I said, a clip, and then I'll ask a question, and we'll go back and forth a little bit. So here's the first clip that the filmmakers selected for us.
Every tribe on this continent was provided with the means to sustain life. Us on the plains was the buffalo.
Everything that we had came from them. The lodges and the clothing and bedding and food.
There was not one thing that we didn't use, when we put up the God, when we built a temple for the Creator out of nature, the pivotal point of the ceremony was using the skull of the buffalo.
Even children's toys were made out of the bones of the buffalo, and the horns were used as cups. There's over 500 purposes for the buffalo body.
But it was not just about subsistence. There was a much deeper relationship with the buffalo than that. In the native world, everything is made up of energy waves. And in fact, the energy waves are really what we would refer to as the spirit. Everything is animate. There's no such thing as being inanimate. So that's what we talk about when we say all my relations. Because I'm made up of energy waves. I've got spirit, see, but so does everything else. So they're all my relatives. So when we're talking about buffalo, we're talking about our relation, our relative.
We had everything. The means to sustain a rich and healthy life was with us. The bison was that gift to us. They wipe them out. Wipe us out.
Part of the history was that the buffalo was annihilated, almost to extinction. And it was done so on purpose, so that the Indians would disappear. And along with that idea, there's always this notion of entitlement. And so people came out over here, that is, Europeans came out, and they said, we're entitled to this land. were entitled to the resources. And so the buffalo in no time disappeared.
Over the course of the 19th century, in a coordinated, sustained assault promoted by the US and Canadian governments, buffalo were slaughtered from a population of more than 30 million, down to less than 1,000. In the span of a generation, they disappeared from our lives.
So much going on in there. I'm going to ask for a little indulgence from our audience today, in person and on Zoom. Getting to prepare for this week brought back all of my old film classes from college. So a few of my questions might be a little esoteric, I guess is the word. So I'm going to just start with one of those, which is I wanted to ask about the stunning use of water in this clip. I was kind of, really moved by and struck by how, water along the plains, it was like this universal spirit, and at the same time, water was used to carry the blood of the bison as they were being slaughtered. And I just wanted to ask you as filmmakers, what led you to those choices, and how did you think about water as you were putting this together and editing?
The beet juice.
I'll let you, yeah, you can follow up with that. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the process, I think, for us was experimentation. There was a lot of thought on how do we visually complement what's being said in a way that's dramatic and not maybe necessarily too on the nose. So a lot of it, I think, was instinctual. I was the editor of this, and so like we all involved in the whole process, but I was the one kind of sorting through the literally 10,000 shots that we have available for this, and I mean with the first shot of the water, it was more instinctual than anything else, because you see the surface, but then as you go under, you see the light rays that are invisible to the eye, and that correlates to what Leroy is saying about seeing the world in a very different way, in a way that most people today don't look at the world. And then as far as the blood, I mean, we just had a lot of conversations, like how do we show the buffalo slaughter without, point to it without having to, spend $10,000 to recreate a buffalo being killed, and so we tried out different things, and one of the things we tried was those just blood in the water, and it felt we tried putting it on the land, and we had other shots, but this one was the one that was just hits you like a punch in the gut, and but we experimented a bit with how to do it, and
we ended up using beet powder, beet juice powder, and so that kind of got the color of that. And then the shot underneath of the water, we actually bought a fish tank and put the camera in, and that's how we got that shot.
We made sure it was biodegradable.
Yeah.
I'll just say one thing about water.
Yeah, so the fish got some healthy beet juice downstream.
Yeah, and I also think it has even further context. Water is an incredible, important resource for not just Blackfeet, but all indigenous communities. And in Blackfeet culture, water is incredibly sacred, and we feed our water spirits whenever the water is usually in spring, which is kind of a renewal and rebirth. And so Blackfeet feed the sweet peats, which are the water spirits and kind of spirits that inhabit that realm.
Thank you. So I have another question, and maybe this is more for Ivan and Ivy, but I think this clip sets up a lot too about the different views of nature. There's a very Eurocentric sort of man versus nature, but some of the indigenous people in this clip talked very specifically about the all creatures are our relatives. And I'm curious, I guess, how did you approach portraying both of these very different viewpoints? And is it possible to do that without really making a value judgment?
Yeah, we really tried to frame it just kind of in a really historical context with regards to, manifest destiny, which was a huge, incredible, it was kind of seen as this divine right to conquer and kind of settle the West. And so, we were very, tried to be very cognizant of, not necessarily like mincing words, but just being very, this was kind of deliberate. It was like it was like codified in law and legal acts and legislation. And so it was really kind of important to kind of highlight. But, I think that also throughout the film, we try to show that both of these worldviews of Blackfeet, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, maybe settler worldviews, that historically, that they don't have to be opposed, that they can work together in collaboration, because, we really want to highlight through this film that, a lot of the work the Blackfeet are doing supports everyone. The Blackfeet, some of the work they're doing on conservation and climate change, they're a small community who's, largely been probably the most affected by it in the area, but are still doing a lot of infrastructure building, which will hopefully benefit everyone. They had the water compact, which they signed recently, which non-Indigenous farmers benefit from, non-Indigenous communities. And so, it's kind of just understanding the ways in which maybe the values oppose and clash, but also the ways in which collaboration can work, and these communities can come together, because we see it a lot as, as much as it's a Blackfeet story of reconnection to nature, to this animal, we feel that non-Indigenous communities, it's just as important that they reconnect with the importance of this animal as well.
I think that about the value judgment, I think, in our narration, the narration of the film that Ivan and I wrote is not, in that space we tried as best as possible to be, to not cast value judgments, just to present things as they were, like the facts of it. And the facts of it was there was a coordinated, sustained assault to kill bison in order to take native land and to kill off the native people so that the Europeans could come in and homestead. That's just what happened. And so, there are certain people that we interview, if they have opinions, then if someone says something, it's obviously, it's their perspective. And so we just lay it out and people can consider it and see what they think.
All right, you ready for another clip?
Around the same time that Paulette on the Blood Reserve in Alberta was waking up to a desire to bring buffalo home, tribal leaders on the Blackfeet reservation in Montana decided they wanted to bring buffalo back too. So they secured a herd from Yellowstone National Park and turned them loose.
They were wild animals running loose on the Blackfoot reservation. No one could control them.
They were sort of like orphans, They kind of got passed around to different individuals within the tribe, and they just were never properly cared for.
During that early time of reconnecting Inuit back to the homelands, it wasn't widely accepted by our people to have the animal back for the ranchers, farmers. When they see mice coming in and destroying crops or breaking fences and grazing on grass that they paid for, it didn't sit well with a lot of our own people.
Every rancher on the reservation was shooting them. They were getting abused.
This hostility wasn't shared by everyone on the reservation, but of those who adopted the cowboy way, it was common. an attitude that can be traced back to one government act. Historically, we shared communal land, but after the creation of the reservation, in 1887, the U.S. government passed the Dawes Act, which broke apart our land into relatively small plots given to the male heads of families. It was an act designed to force us into ranching and farming, take more land for non-tribal homesteaders, and ultimately to fracture our community. Among many other challenges, the Dawes Act ultimately led to dependence on cattle ranching and the possessiveness of one's individual plot of land. So when buffalo returned, the ranchers didn't see their relatives. They saw competition and threat. After more than a decade of this conflict, the tribe enlisted a Blackfeet cowboy to corral the herd and teach them new habits.
Why did they choose me? Well, I guess the important one me. They tried to put everybody on the Blackfoot reservation. Or as I know, I was the one that got them in the crowd. Once we got them in the crowd, you got to be on your hand. I never trained where they go to the gates. And if he wasn't there, open the gate for the buffalo, we'll take the gate out. So, when they got ready to go, they win. And this is what got them in trouble.
Despite Mouse's best efforts, as time went on, the tension with individual Blackfeet ranchers and farmers only grew until it reached a point where the tribe's leadership, the tribal council, decided to round up and sell most of the herd.
I love the buffalo. And you sit there watching things all day long. It would be perfect if there wasn't no fences. But we got too goddamn many fences. As long as we got all these fences, it ain't gonna work.
So I kind of prepared two questions for this clip, and I'm just going to ask them in one, basically. Number one, I know there are great mouse hall stories. There've got to be great mouse hall stories. So if you would like to share one of them, that would be amazing. But I was also really struck by the last thing he said about fences. And, you know, the introduction of fences to the Western landscape changed everything. So if you think about mouse hall and fences,
Yeah, for Mouse, I mean, I don't know Mouse well. We just interviewed him this one time, but one of the stories I heard, which Mouse was connected to, was when they ultimately sold off this first herd. They sold off most of the animals, but they had to round them up first. And at this point, the animals had just been kind of wandering wherever they wanted to go. And it took like a full day of like 40 trucks out on the reservation finding them and slowly herding them towards an enclosure. I think Mouse was involved with that, but it was a big effort. And they got them close down to this corral, and the animals kind of got scared and they started circling and circling and circling. And the Blackfeet people, they hadn't really worked, they didn't know much about buffalo at this point because they'd been gone for like 100+ years. And so they just laid on their horns, like, and the buffalo freaked out and started bolting straight back towards the cars. And people were like diving behind, like there was people on four-wheelers, like diving behind the four-wheelers, a buffalo jumping over them. And they gave the animals space, like for another day, just to chill out a bit. Because once buffalo get in that agitated state, they don't stop moving, like they just run. And then the next day they did it again slower, and they were ultimately able to get them in a corral. But yeah, I think that's the story that stands out. One of them about Mouse, and yeah,
Yeah, no, when we were conceptualizing the story, I was talking with Daniel, and I was like, we really need to do something, because the Dawes Act, I think, is just this incredibly, I think it's a really important piece of legislation throughout the history and understanding of Indigenous communities and native land tenure and just the way reservation systems are structured. And so when we were kind of conceptualizing the story a bit further, I was like, we really have to talk about the Dawes Act and how devastating that piece of legislation was in regards to why it's so hard to bring bison back now. And so, you have all of these plots of land on a reservation, and one of the, President Roosevelt, who at the time was the president when the act was enacted, called it a mighty pulverizing engine to break up our native collective kinship, our Indian collective kinship, and kind of understanding the ways in which bison operate. They just don't operate in that way, the similar ways of cattle. So, they don't abide by fences. I think most people don't know that bison are probably about 95% muscle. And so they can jump 6-7 feet in the air. So you have to have specific bison fences. And so that's even just historically the impact of fences that has had on the reintroduction to bison has been just something that, it's you never want to frame things as like negative or bad, but it's kind of been a hindrance in that aspect, because bison just don't follow those migratory patterns. If they want to get to another plot of land to get to grass, they're going to tear down a fence. And so it's just kind of understanding of the importance of the way in which land is structured on a reservation, but also B, a lot of kind of the structure, that structuralism and how it affects the impacts of bringing bison back.
There was a deleted scene from the film about someone who talked about there was a meeting with elders on the Blood Reserve, because the Blood Reserve north of the Blackfeet Reservation in Canada is part of the Blackfoot Confederacy, and part of our story is set there. But she talked about how they had a meeting with elders to talk about what did the biggest harm to the community over their lifespan. And there are all these options. I mean, there are just a lot of really bad things that happened. But number one on the list was fences. Like the establishment of fences just broke apart the community. Whereas previously you could kind of just ride into a friend's house, or but once the fences were there, it just kind of sectioned off and shattered the community in a way that none of the other things that they struggled with did.
All right, so as you're watching the next clip, think of fences, because they're really prominent and important.
Because of this, the only way for the community to physically reconnect with the buffalo, to continue renewing that relationship, was with the tribal herd, managed by the Blackfeet Buffalo Program. Caring for this herd, keeping them safe and healthy, was a lot of work. Some of it up close and personal.
Learning how to manage them in our world today is sometimes we have to manage them in a way that we know how with other animals like the cattle. So that means we have to get them in sometimes and take care of their health needs, whether that's vaccinations or sorting off younger bulls, so they're not crossbreeding or whatever. But we need to work.
Oh yeah, it's a little exciting out here, but just gotta get away so they go the right direction. Not too bad, but just one right there. Chute got stuck. They come running through. Pretty scary. You see that guy?
Nowadays, you know, it ain't just like it was a long time ago. You have to keep them herded, you have to work them. But they're still a wild animal. When you get them into corrals and stuff, you could, you know, you'll find that out pretty damn easy that they're still wild. Oh!
Days like this, while rare, were part of the conditions for keeping this herd on our cattle-dominated reservation. This is the world we were forced into. To fit into that world, this is what the Blackfeet Buffalo program needed to do. Without this work, there would be no Elk Island herd, no opportunity to rebuild a relationship with Imi. This was the cost of survival until the tribe's leadership decided that freedom was more important.
Okay, I just have to ask about that dancing bison. He was killing it. It just surprised me how light on their feet. I mean, they're huge. What surprised you as you got closer to bison? Was there anything in their behavior that sort of took you by surprise?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, at some point it was funny because when we were shooting, you know, you kind of get lost in like what you want to frame, how do you want to frame it and everything. And so at one point when we were shooting, I set up my camera and I had like a specific shot that I wanted, and my cousin Terrain was like, I think they're gonna come over that ridge. And I was like, they're not. And so I ended up having to like get the camera ready and like set it. And then I just saw them coming at me like that. And I was like, oh my God. So I like took the camera and took off. But no, they're incredible. They're incredibly powerful, you know, animal. And to see them corralled up like that, it's so, you know, that shot specifically is just so devastating but beautiful at the same time.
I think I was just amazed at how, when they're all together, I mean, this isn't maybe a scene that would show it in this capacity, but on some of the bison drive scenes, like just, they're almost like schools of fish, like they are almost like one kind of mind when they're all working together, and they have like larger bulls on the outside who will like, we have one scene where a horseback rider on one of the fall drives where they have to drive them from their winter to their summer pasture. And like the bison, like they're just literally all moving, and then one kind of like stops and turns around and charges at the horseback rider. And so they have like these incredible kind of, I know there's a scientific term for the way in which fish move kind of in a school, but similar to bison, like it's just kind of incredible how they all navigate as a group and how they're really kind of just incredible to see them all move at once. It's a really kind of a surreal experience, and it's just kind of incredible like that, like, you know, learning that bison are just kind of pure muscle and pure mass, and they'll tear down fences, knock cars over to get where they want to go, because it's almost like this evolutionary biological drive.
Yeah, it's funny, when we were shooting it outside of Glacier, it was me, Zane Clampett, the other cinematographer, and Ivan, and me and Zane are just like standing outside. Ivan's like, get in the car, you're getting too close to them. And me and Zane are just standing there like with our cameras like, well, this is fun. But they were like so close to us, and Ivan's like, just move back a little bit. But,
There's the warning sign that they all taught us.
Yeah.
That they're the first warning sign. Like I was pretty nervous around them for years, They said, look, just watch the tails. The first sign is if the tail goes up like that, that's the first sign that you're getting in their space and they're getting a little uncomfortable with you. I mean, there's all this talk about how powerful they are and how they can pretty much destroy anything they want to, but they don't do it that much. They only do it if they're scared or if they're being harassed. Like, they are so chill. Like, they are the most relaxed animals you'll ever hang out with. Like, they're just content wherever they are, just being there and just being with their group. It's that was striking, just how relaxed they are. But also, like, there really is this presence to them. Like, they'll just stare at you for a long time. They just keep staring and taking you in, and you're just. They have this real. You can feel the depth of their being when you spend time with them, which is incredible quality. Like, most other animals are gonna be like bye, but buffalo are like they'll just be with you. It's.
All right, one more clip and then I'm gonna have you guys ask questions, okay? So be thinking.
In the non-native world, everything was created by God for the benefit of man, see. And if they're going to exist, it's because we're allowing them to exist, see. So that savior approach is very much in the deep psyche of non-Indians, as opposed to what's really deep in the psyche of Blackfoot Indians is about relationships. In Blackfoot thought, all of the universe is always in constant motion. It's always in constant flux. Best we can do is, in this constant flux, is really looking for reference points. In other words, some things that might repeat themselves, see, like day and night, movement of animals, movement of stars, and so on. We say, if we're going to exist into the future, then those repetitive patterns that give us life, that make us who we are, we have to renew those. You and I as humans live in a very narrow gap of factors and conditions that are ideal for our existence. If those ideal conditions and factors are not there or messed around with, we won't be around very long. So things like air, water, all the animals, all the plants, all the bugs, and whether you like them or not, they play a role in this eco-balance that brings about our continued existence. So that's one of the ideas behind the notion of renewal of the relationship. Okay? You have to renew those things that continue to give you existence.
what a powerful statement. Renew those things that allow you to continue to exist. That's just lots to think about. Okay, who in the room has questions? I know there are a couple on Zoom. Yes, sir. If you'll stand up and ask the question, I'll repeat it into the microphone so that our folks on Zoom can hear.
I was struck by the significance of water in one of the first clips you made there, and the concentration of the beach flood as it went down. But water is a universal solvent. And so is that dispersed the significance of the killing of the buffalo and the relationship to the Native Americans, I think got lost as Manifest Destiny moved forward and laws were passed and things. And it would be neat if the beet blood could be reconcentrated, because I think that's what movies like this do, is bring that back into perspective of what we've lost, you know. When I was young, it was cowboys and Indians, and the Indians were always the bad guys. But it isn't that way in reality, so thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah. So just for the folks on Zoom, the comment was about how the water dispersed the blood, but also how that can be reconstituted. How the flow of water, the flow of history, right? They both allow for things to disperse, change, be reconstituted. Did anybody want to make a comment about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think just kind of touching again on, the importance of water. Like, I think that there's been a really, whether you like kind of follow news or conservation, there's been really kind of this discussion of water and the future of water and kind of understanding the ways in which indigenous communities, like I just saw this really kind of cool article, I can't remember if it was The Atlantic or Mother Jones, talking about, a lot of these kind of large-scale conservation projects take place on indigenous lands. And so, these indigenous people who, I think people always kind of think of us as like, within regards to our connection to nature, kind of maybe like the old Iron Eyes Cody, the kind of crying. But, it's because indigenous people understand kind of these finite resources and the ways in which we have to protect them. Because, for Blackfeet, we've been documented in Montana in this area for 10,000 plus years. And so understanding our relationship, but I think really understanding this kind of this reconnection and how water kind of holds all of these trace memories. And, I think of some of our ceremonies that use water. And so it's really powerful, and I'm glad we included it in the film.
So I'm going to ask a quick question. Oh, whoop, there's a question there. Yes?
I don't know if you have the answer to this, but in the early 80s, I lived at Fort Peck, and they had a small herd there. Did they have the same problems? Has that herd flourished, or did they have the same difficulties with fences and so forth, and the herd hasn't increased, or do you have any idea?
The question is about a herd of bison that were on the Fort Peck Reservation in the early 80s.
Yeah, they have like an actual quarantine facility in Fort Peck. So one of the big things, some of the legal requirements in the state is, animals, since they recently just got some animals from Yellowstone, so they got some of the wild bison there, and I know that their bison program, they're still very strong. I don't quite know all of the details, but I have a lot of friends in Fort Peck. And I think that I was surprised to know that the Crow Reservation, because I live in Billings, that Seneca people, that they have like a small little herd. Of course, there's the National Bison Range that the Selis, Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribe manage now. And so, one of the characters in our film, Paulette, her goal beyond kind of the North American return of bison is kind of bison on this continental scale, because bison really are a keystone species around the world, as important as they are to the plains. And so, I think that people like Fort Peck and them still receiving animals, I think it was just like within the last week or two that they received some bison from Yellowstone. But I'd say that those other groups and tribal communities, I think, are still working really hard to bring bison to their ancestral lands as well.
So I have another question. A few years ago, actually during COVID, one of our storytelling speakers was Leilani Upham. I was struck when she spoke about the language that the Blackfeet language is very verb-based, whereas English is very noun-based, right? And so I wanted to just kind of ask, did you experience a difference in language as filmmakers? I don't know if either of you speak your indigenous language fluently, but I'm just curious how that verb-based language changes maybe even the way that you approach filmmaking, and how important is movement because of it?
I don't want to speak too much, but I actually went to Nitsipuwatsun, which is the Blackfeet language immersion school. So I've never, not even close to being fluent, but understanding, the language, Blackfeet language is very much in an active voice. And so understanding that everything is kind of here and now. And I mean, even the way in which Blackfeet look at time, it's very much this kind of cyclical, almost like flattened quantum of our continuum of time where, we experience things kind of congruently with ancestors and our people in the future, but language definitely, even kind of an interesting fact, so Iniwa, which is kind of the modern term for bison, isn't maybe the historical correct term, so that there's Inyo, which is probably the actual correct pronunciation of the Blackfeet word for bison, but Ini means death, and so kind of understanding the ways in which one of our Blackfeet language speakers talks about it. We interviewed him for another project, but talks about, bison, calling them death isn't a negative term. It's a term in which, our creation story is that the Creator created bison after creating us, so we'd have sustenance and we'd have resources. And so like that term, using that term of death for the bison means that their death is an incredibly important part of our sustenance as people. So language is definitely something that is really important to kind of bison and all the return.
Yeah, and me and Ivan grew up traditional Blackfeet, so we understood the complexities and that bison were so integral to who we are as a people. And we grew up learning our culture, which was such an important aspect of as a filmmaker, like all the practices that I had growing up and then doing filmmaking, learning from my culture and language.
I wanted to know if anyone at the time of this really terrible slaughter of these magnificent animals, was there anyone in the government or some individual or entity that was pushing back on stopping that?
So the question was there anybody at the time of the slaughter of the bison in the U.S. government pushing back against those policies?
Yeah, I definitely have seen some firsthand historical accounts. So actually I was privy to reading some firsthand historical accounts kind of around the similar time of the Blackfeet, and I think it was also the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribe, how they were grappling with the Indian agents. So when reservations were created, there was an Indian agent that was placed on a reservation which would manage, the distribution of commodities, the distribution of any kind of resources to the communities while we were still kind of growing into a reservation system. But yeah, there was a lot of firsthand accounts from these Indian agencies where there was actually like a lot of empathy, understanding that, these people were starving, they were dying. There's a huge historical event, Starvation Winter for the Blackfeet, where the Indian agent, the kind of people who were managing our reservation didn't get us resources during a winter, and like a quarter of our population perished during the winter. And so, I think that if there maybe wasn't anyone, I know that there was possibly, I'm trying to think back and rack my memory of some of the research I did, but I know that there was a few people who were understanding of like, we're killing off this incredibly important mammal, but yeah, some of those first-hand accounts from the Indian agents, there was surprisingly a lot of empathy, understanding of how, like, what are we doing to these people and type stuff. So there was probably people higher up in, back in DC who probably had similar concerns.
Yeah, and I know that I think my understanding, there was this sense of, there were people who had empathy for the extinction of the bison, or for all the slaughter of the bison, but it seemed like they felt like it was just inevitable that they were going to be gone. Like there wasn't, for a lot of people, even like Teddy Roosevelt, who's, he has had a pretty big conservation impact on the United States at a governmental level, but even he, like with knowing that the bison were going extinct, what he wanted to do was just go out and kill one of the last ones. Like that was his thing. Like, oh, I could bring it back. I could just show, like so even he didn't seem to have at some level this idea of let's like really try to change things and let's really try to save them, at least at that kind of highest government level. But there were some people in New York City who created the American Bison Society in the early 1900s, which is now the Wildlife Conservation Society. And they own all the zoos in New York City, and they have conservation programs literally in like the entire planet now. But they did make an effort to try to save bison. And they were the ones who were they played a big role in the creation of the National Bison Range on the Flathead Reservation. The way they did it was kind of messed up, very messed up, excluding the tribes. And so there were people kind of in the maybe blue blood New York society that were trying to help. And then there were some Native people. I mean, the National Bison Range probably wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for a Kalispel guy, a Ponderay man, who captured a small group of orphans around the time that buffalo were disappearing. He got some orphan calves from Blackfeet territory and brought them over the mountains, and then started a herd of his own on the Flathead Reservation. And that herd grew into what's known as the Pablo Allard herd, which was about a few hundred bison. It was the largest herd in North America on the Flathead Reservation, just roaming free, until the U.S. government allotted the Flathead Reservation and said, get rid of them. But some of those animals made up the National Bison Range. So there were small groups, there were Native people, and there were some white folks who were trying. But it wasn't it wasn't a huge movement. It was like small people small group of people who were trying to push back, trying to save them.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for doing this project. It's fantastic and very, very meaningful, and it's just tremendous. My question is a little more practical, and that is, how, for the Blackfeet bison, how big is the herd or herds now? How big is it envisioned? How large is it envisioned to be? And is the space there so that has been identified so that the buffalo are more or less free rather than corralled?
So, sorry, I'm just going to repeat the question. How big is the herd on the Blackfeet Reservation? And is there sufficient land? What's the vision for the future of that herd?
Yeah, I mean, their numbers fluctuate depending on how much grass there is, and I mean right now. So there are two herds now. There's this. I guess I'm going to ruin the ending of the film. Do you all know what happened up there on the Blackfeet Reservation last summer? Because I don't want to ruin the end of the film if you didn't. But there are buffalo that are now up at on the border of Glacier National Park. It's a very small number, but those animals can go into Glacier when they want to eventually, and they'll have more than 1 million acres that they can roam. But on the reservation, and they'll be able to come out on the reservation onto an area of about, I think it's like 40,000 acres right now. And it's a very difficult situation because it's like literally like 99.8% of the 1.5 million acres on the reservation are allocated for cattle. And so there's the tribe, so they got these two herds, they got this small little group on the border of Glacier. It's just like 17 of them, and they want to put more up there. And then on the reservation itself, they have it's about 500 to 600. Sometimes the numbers go up to like 800, but if the grass doesn't sustain them, they sell them down. And that herd has about 15,000 acres now. So it's not a ton of acreage. There's always constant talk and constant pushing and constant requests for more land for them. But it's a very difficult situation because there's a lot of economic hardship there. And one of the biggest revenue generators for the tribe is leasing land for cattle. And so when they allocate more land for bison, they lose revenue. So it's a challenging situation to be in. I think certain people, I don't know if there's a unified tribal vision. There's a lot of people with different perspectives, but some people would love to see in the long term, like the majority of the land are buffalo. I don't know how realistic that is. In the short term, it's not realistic, but maybe in a couple hundred years, it could be possible. And so I think some people, there are still some cattle ranchers who are like, just get rid of them on the reservation. But the majority of people there really want them. So I think over time, probably the momentum will be to grow and to grow and to grow. But the tribal herd is still that corral situation, like once or twice a year. And then they have these 2 to 3 to 4 parcels of land that they have to be moved between. Although there is talk of setting up a migration corridor so that herd could roam west to east as they wanted to.
There are a couple of questions on Zoom I want to get to. I know one of them was, where can we see the film after tonight? Do you want to address where it might be available?
Yeah, this is our premiere. We don't know exactly where it'll be. I mean, there's going to be Sunday night too, because we won this Big Sky Award. So they put a second screening tomorrow night, but it's also sold out already. So maybe I shouldn't have even told you because that's bringing your hopes up. But next one we know of is Bozeman, Montana on March 21st. And there's one on the East Coast soon after that. And then it's just a process of slowly rolling it out. We will be, over the next couple of years, we'll be doing screenings kind of all throughout the state. Eventually, it'll be online somewhere, so you could stream it somewhere. But we're in the very early processes of figuring out where exactly it'll be. You can check out our social media if you're interested in keeping in the loop. Our Instagram is at thunderheartfilms.com. That's our Instagram account. And Facebook, you just search Thunderheart Films, and we will post there as we know. But we're just at the very beginning process of it.
Jim.
I just want to compliment you folks on the quality of your documentary. Outstanding. And some of the composition, like the bison herd in the foreground and the Rocky Mountain snow-covered background, great. How much of that skill is from training, and how much of it is from kind of an intuitive mental process?
So the question is about the magnificent cinematography, especially images like the herd in the foreground and the Rocky Mountains in the background, and how much of that is sort of intuitive versus how much is good film school.
I think it's a mix of both. I think it's there's I think that my personal opinion and experience is there's only so much training you can do. But if you don't have the instinct to find the shot, the training's not going to mean anything. So you need a basic knowledge of how the camera works and how to kind of capture what you envision. Need focal lengths and aperture and things like that. But I think if you don't know where to look and how to look, if you have, you could have a 30-year degree in film school. It doesn't exist. But if you did study 30 years in film school, but you never had practical experience and you don't have the instinct, it's not going to be as good as someone who's never studied film, but who has the instinct to look for the image. So we were really, really lucky. There's something like 20 people who shot for this film over the 7.5 years that we made this. Blackfeet Reservation is really far, so it's hard to have a consistent crew. But yeah, we were really lucky that the people we work with were all very talented, have like a real natural eye, really skilled.
Yeah, and I guess as like a indigenous like woman filmmaker, I guess for me it's just mostly like what's your intention of what you're shooting and how are you capturing it. When I was in film school, I studied kind of that, like all the encompassing of cinematography, editing, directing, producing, writing, and so it's like having those skills, like Daniel said, like you can have all the training in the world, but if you don't utilize and really think hard on like what you're capturing, then it's kind of I wouldn't say meaningless, but it's a lot different, I guess. Yeah.
And I have no film degree, so I'm like, I just hire a really talented cinematographer to help me realize that vision.
The overlord, like,
yeah.
Go do this. Go do that.
That's awesome. All right, I have 2 more questions, and then we're going to wrap up because I know we're a little bit long today, but I think it's worth it, yes?
Yes.
Okay. From Zoom, do you feel more people are paying attention to Indigenous wisdom these days? The popularity of books like Braiding Sweetgrass and other movements, how is that impacting sort of the reception of Indigenous wisdom, but also maybe the reception of Indigenous culture and film and all of it?
Yeah, I guess, there's such a resurgence now of kind of in our small like Indigenous group, we call it like a renaissance of Indigenous people being able to tell their own stories and being able to take that knowledge that we have, whether that's through education or even, and like, you feel your ancestors with you all the time. And so there's such a huge movement going on with, being able to take your voice back and, have stories like this impact people. And yeah, it's just cool. It's cool to see all the Indigenous like talent and knowledge that's around now, and it's just going to get more powerful, I think, and you guys better be ready. So
Yeah, I think it was kind of what I was saying earlier, where I'm finding more and more that I think people are understanding, like the Indigenous communities that have been in these areas for millennia, and their acute understanding of weather patterns and understanding of nature, because often our film we've kind of have billed it as this opportunity for all communities to reconnect with nature in the hopes of understanding that our precarious symbiosis relationship of man versus nature. And I think there's been a big push for Indigenous-led conservation and kind of Indigenous knowledge in that sphere, which I think has been really incredible. And there was a study that's kind of this landmark study, which I remember from a few years ago, where Indigenous people around the world have like 10% or something of they have kind of stewardship over 10% of the land, but it protects like 95% of the environment. So you think of Brazilian Indigenous people trying to protect the rainforest. You think of coastal tribes like the Seminole trying to protect the Everglades. Our community trying to protect Glacier National Park and not having all the glaciers melt, and doing beaver mimicry work to cool certain areas, because beaver dams can cool a certain area by 10 degrees. And so, kind of understanding that knowledge and that ancestral knowledge, I don't really think it's combative with the science and the Western worldview, but I think that they can really learn from one another and collaborate.
So I want to give a nod to the narrator of the film, because we are all celebrating the success of Lily Gladstone. And I know that she was an important part of getting this feature-length documentary made. How important is it to have somebody like Lily Gladstone in the industry pushing for Indigenous films to be made?
That's you, Ivy.
yeah, no, it's. Yeah, Lily is absolutely incredible, and it's so cool to be able to kind of come full circle with a lot of stuff. When I was in film school, I had like stock footage of stuff, like the actors, because Lily was in acting school at the time, and she they had all this stock footage of just like certain scenes, and we had to do it for an editing class, and I was the only one in class to make Lily like the main character in the editing process, because I was like, who is this person? Like, she's so incredible, and she has such a presence on screen, and you know, years, like, we met each other at a grocery store, and I was like, that's Lily Gladstone, like, and no one knew who it was, and I was like, oh, she's you know, she's gonna be big, like, she's so incredible, and she has such a presence on screen, and so, yeah, it's so cool to be able to work with her, and just continue to work, you know, continuing to work with her. You know, she's been such a huge supporter of me and Ivan's work, and Daniel's, you know, from the beginning, and so it's such a cool thing to kind of come full circle with everything, and, you know, it's funny, I was like just thinking about this a couple of days ago where, like, you know, me, Ivan, and Lily are all alumni of University of Montana. So it's like really cool to be able to collab and come together, and it's special.
Ivy just had a big article or an interview in The Guardian come out this morning. So, but that was in connection with Lily. So.
Yeah, Lily's just such a good person. Like, she's just a genuinely really good person, and just wants to help. I mean, having someone like her at the stage she's at, like, it's only good can come of that. She's a remarkable, big-hearted human.
Yeah, she's raising a voice of Indigenous power that is just, it's gonna continue. And, you know, being a Native woman myself, it's such an incredible experience to be a part of, because, you know, we've worked with so many incredible Indigenous artists throughout the years, you know, and yeah, like collaborating with something like on Murder in Bighorn with Roselle Benali, like it's all of these like factors, and a lot of it comes down to like the people that we've met along the way through the fellowships that we have done, like Neo Tarot, Fourth World, Tracy Rector. I met her when I was in film school, and she's kind of like created this web of like really talented Indigenous filmmakers, and so it's cool to be able to kind of pull from each other's, and, you know, it's always uplifting each other. It's not trying to, you know, get above each other. It's uplifting, and I think Lily's doing that, and she's amazing human.
Well, we're excited for Lily. We're also very excited for you. This was
Thank you.
Amazing. Galen, can we get those 2 tickets to Jess? And then we're going to draw for somebody to win 2 tickets to see the whole feature-length film today at 6. Well, let's let the filmmakers pull the ticket. Just one? Just one. Okay. All right, check your ticket numbers. 214468. Oh, somebody's got it. 214468. No? Is it one of our people on Zoom? No? Right, well, I guess you can pick a number, dear.
You're lucky.
Okay, so we'll try this one. 214455. Woo-hoo! Colleen Moran. Awesome. All right. Colleen, I will bring you your tickets. So can we have just one more round of applause to say thank you to the filmmakers? And I just wanted to mention that next week is our last winter storytelling of 2024. We will have the author, Christopher Preston, talking about his book, Tenacious Beasts. I think we learned about some tenacious beasts today. So it'll be interesting to hear about some more species that are fighting for their survival. And everybody have a great week. I will try to share on our Facebook page a link to their Facebook page so that you can learn more and follow them on social media. Thanks so much.